Okay, welcome. Today we'll be looking at Gateway 3 of Chapter 3, Health and Diseases for Core Geography. Gateway 3 looks at how can we manage the current and future spread of infectious diseases, and we will be looking at it once again through the examples of malaria and HIV/AIDS. Now, one good way of thinking about these type of diseases that we're going to look at, thinking of it as the new student, right? Some of these infectious diseases are brand new, new to humankind, due to evolution of diseases, and as we evolve, diseases, bacteria and viruses also evolve, and as a result you have new diseases that will come about. Then the other ones that we are dealing with, of course, are the recalcitrant students. So these are the ones that are like the zombies that you watch in movies, right? It dies, but it never really goes away. Okay, these are the re-emerging infectious diseases. Okay. Now then, what are the emerging diseases then? The emerging diseases are those that are new, that medical science has never encountered before. They may be variants of other diseases that are significant enough in difference that they are classified as their own disease. An example of one of them is SARS, which occurred in late 2002, right? Which started in China. SARS is a disease with pneumonia-like symptoms, right, that spread across China and then became a global pandemic as well. Okay. Now, if you look at re-emerging diseases are things that mankind tries continually to fight, but it gets pushed down to a point where it is almost gone, and then there is a re-emergence due to a change in certain factors that allow it to make a comeback. So, an example of re-emerging infectious disease that we are familiar with is dengue fever, right? So you do know that we have a dengue cycle in Singapore. It is always like Groundhog Day, right? You do our best, we suppress the numbers, and then the dry season comes and it gets better, and then the wet season comes, and then it breaks out again. Okay, and it does every time there's a breakout. There's a slight mutation to the strand of dengue, and so we're continually fighting this disease. Now, if you look at page 223 and 224 of your textbook, you will find two different chloroplasm maps that will give you a greater understanding of the spread of these re-emerging as well as emerging diseases. On page 224, there's another chloroplasm map that shows you the spread of dengue across the world. Now, when you look at that, you will realize that dengue is not something that's locked within developmental status. Dengue is something that's locked within a climate band. So the zone where you find malaria is also the zone where you find dengue. The main common criteria being that both are mosquito vectors. So when you have a mosquito as your main vector, you will need a certain type of climate condition, a certain amount of water to be present for them to breed, certain amount of temperature for them to be active enough to be hunting. And so if you are located within the Tropic of Cancer, downwards to the equator and ending at the Tropic of Capricorn, you are at the highest risk of dengue and malaria. Next up, I want to briefly talk about malaria itself and why malaria has re-emerged. There are four main reasons for the re-emergence of malaria. Okay, the first one being resistance to anti-malarial drugs. Second one being climate change. Of course, there are also re-emergence due to air travel as well as insect-resistant mosquitoes. Okay. Now, how do you develop resistance to anti-malarial drugs? Basically, when you use counterfeit or incomplete doses of your original anti-malaria drugs, it allows the parasites to build resistance to this drug itself. So when this happens, right, and there's widespread proliferation of these people who only take it, and once the symptoms disappear, they stop taking the drugs, you're going to build a community of resistant parasites, and then the original malaria drugs will no longer work. In terms of climate change, as the climate gets warmer, temperatures in higher altitudes, places that could not support mosquito populations, will end up being able to support these populations, and therefore, with the mosquito vector being able to travel further away from the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, you will see an increase in the re-emergence of malaria in these areas. Now, bearing in mind that these areas have never been exposed to malaria before, so for them, right, when malaria mosquitoes first emerge there, it is very, very deadly. They do not have any form of immunity against even the most basic form of it. terms of air travel, due to increase in air travel, your disease carrying organisms can be transported as well. Now, however, you need to bear in mind that climate is still the big factor, because if you go to if the mosquito on the plane is brought from a tropical zone to somewhere where it's snowing or it's freezing, the mosquito will not survive. However, if it's within reintroduce something there. Lastly, when we talk about insect-resistant mosquitoes, right, when you use chemical pesticides, okay, against the mosquitoes, they over time do build an immunity against it. So you cannot just stay put with your chemical pesticides. You need to continually evolve as the mosquitoes evolve as well. It's like a arms war where you are trying to build the next big bomb to kill the next cluster of mosquitoes. So once again, very quick recap. These are your 4 main reasons for the resistance or re-emergence for malaria: drug resistance, air travel, climate change, as well as insect-resistant mosquitoes. Now, when we talk about challenges in managing malaria itself, right here, we're looking at 2 main factors: population growth as well as global connectedness. So if you look at these two, the concept behind this is very similar to what we learned in food resources, very similar to what we've learned earlier on. Okay, why is it difficult to manage a disease? Right, it's got to do with how many people you're dealing with at the moment, and how fast these fellas seem to be able to travel nowadays. So if you look at the picture that's in the slide now, right, this is basically a photo of New York City. So when you have this large amount of people, what does it mean? It means that the potential for people to get exposed to malaria is going to be very much larger. Okay, and the global connectedness allows people who are infected to move on and infect other people. Okay, and allow mosquito vectors in other areas that do not have exposure to malaria but are able to carry the virus to come into contamination and to begin turning into vectors that will continue to spread this malaria in the other areas. So global travel is actually one of the biggest problems that we need to deal with in terms of managing diseases. If you look at what is happening around us in this period of time, 2019-2020, where we have the COVID-19 outbreak pandemic, this global connectedness is one of the biggest problems we are facing initially as well. So the way to deal with this is to effectively close all your borders. However, you have to understand, when you do this, there is a massive impact on the global economy. Now, if we were to look now at challenges in managing HIV and AIDS, you will realize that the challenges are different from what malaria is, because HIV AIDS, right, the root cause of this is a lifestyle issue, right? It's a lifestyle issue, whether it's a lifestyle by choice or it's a lifestyle because of consequences of life, that you are forced into a situation where you are at high risk of being exposed to HIV/AIDS. The nature of it is still a lifestyle spread. So what are the general challenges in managing HIV/AIDS? It comes along in terms of detecting. It's hard to detect. The stigma with detection, the stigma with testing, lifestyle choices that people are unwilling or unable to give up. Cost of the drugs, okay? Cost of these drugs are not cheap. And then, of course, modern transportation, once again, playing a very important role in making it very troublesome to localize and to isolate HIV/AIDS. Right, detection on its own, as we've covered this earlier on in Gateway 1 and 2, detection is a long dormant phase where you can be a carrier of the virus and yet test negative, or yet not show any symptoms of it. Okay, not showing symptoms is a big killer, because you don't show symptoms, you don't know, and you don't take precautions at all. Okay, stigma itself is we also covered earlier on. So many a times, like even in Singapore in the year 2020, right, there's still a large stigma against anybody who is tested HIV positive. So as a result of that, a lot of people who, even when they fear that they are positive, they refuse to go for testing because they do not want to be identified and then stigmatized against. Okay, lifestyle choices, we are talking more in the case of the people who don't have a choice in this matter, not so much those who choose continually to do risky behavior, right, and to partake in activities that will put them at higher risk. We're looking at more the case of people who have no choice, the very, very poor, the very marginalized people, the very oppressed people in society, your women, your uneducated people, your poor laborers. Once again, cost of drugs, right? The antiretroviral drugs, are very, very expensive and is not always readily available. Okay, then next, when you look at modern transport, air travel allows you to travel thousands of miles within a day, and as a result, you can do your relocation diffusion. So these in total are your biggest challenges in managing HIV/AIDS. Now, where can you find more details about these? You can find it, of course, within your textbook itself. So if you are to look at page 227 onwards, you will find more details and more examples of this. So if you want to know more, please refer to your textbook or the notes that your teachers have provided for you. Now next, we're going to look at what you can do to manage the spread of infectious diseases in general, right? There are 4 groups that can play an active role in this. The individuals, the communities, the governments, as well as the organizations like NGOs and the sort. When we are looking at the individuals, the choice is indeed yours. Okay, there is always a choice of taking better care of your own surroundings. Okay, taking care of your own health, your own sanitation, staying safe, staying clean, making the right or less risky lifestyle choices. So social responsibility helps. I would like to bring you back to the current situation with COVID-19, right? Some of the new measures that were put in have totally changed the way that we live our lives. Cleaning up after you've eaten, cleaning up before you eat at the table, right? These are all very simple and good habits that not everybody used to have, but with the emergence of this new disease, people start to take this more seriously. Hand washing is another very simple thing that an individual can take and greatly reduce the risk of spreading a lot of these diseases. Now, many a times in your earlier life, you may have encountered people who, for the very who visit toilets and then either just splash their hands with water or don't even bother to wash their hands at all and they leave. Right, that's a horrendous habit, but with the new COVID-19 situation, that has greatly reduced. Now, what about communities? Now, communities basically are social groups that live in a particular area or groups that share a common culture. Okay, so they do have an important role to play because they apply a sort of role or peer pressure on one another. So you can as a community, right, introduce disease control strategies, decide where you can implement them and who can implement them, and you can also engage health workers to train and monitor members of your community. Now, if you're in Singapore and near the year 2020, you would know this gentleman here. He's the health minister, Mr. Gan Kim Yong. Right, he's been in the news almost daily for this period of time because of the COVID-19 situation that we're undergoing. So he represents the government. Now, the government can undertake a great and very important role in managing diseases. So the government's decision will affect everybody in the country itself. So government is a very powerful tool. Now, what are some of these precautionary measures that at the government level they can do? Okay, vaccinations, taking care of the environment. So when you are able to find a vaccine against certain type of disease, for example in H1N1, in Singapore they found they have a vaccine against it, and they were able to use a vaccination program to protect the population against H1N1. Okay, but there is a limitation to vaccination. Vaccination takes time, so if within that period of time for the vaccine to take effect, you may still run the risk of getting infected. Okay, other things that can be implemented include things like fogging. So Singapore also does this, Thailand also does this. They do thermal fogging to reduce the growth of mosquitoes. right? It's expensive, but it can be carried out by the government. The government also has certain bodies that can be actively engaged in vector control. So in Singapore, NEA is the government body that deals with mosquitoes. So they come up with campaigns, the Mozzie Wipeout series. They come up with active mechanisms like breeding the species of mosquitoes that will kill off the virus-carrying mosquitoes. Also, there are things like the active measures that they can put in place. Okay. Lastly, one of the other things the government can do, or the government alone can do, is control measures. So, like in an attempt to deal with the massive pandemic of COVID-19, right? A very drastic action was taken. We had a circuit breaker installed in Singapore for almost 2 months. Okay, where people were not allowed to go out of the house for non-essential items. Only things like you can go jogging, and suddenly everybody becomes like a jogger. But you are not allowed to go out, and these are things that only the government can do. So a very interesting table on page 236 of the textbook. It shows you what exactly are the different forms of things or of measures that the government can do. Okay, governments can do surveillance, government can do education, government can also do enforcement, government has the money to do research, and government has the legal rights to do regulation. So within your different groups that can help manage disease, right, the government is always going to be the most significant one. Now, if it sounds very familiar, it's because we have covered actually similar kind of powers within the government when we studied the other human job topics of food as well as tourism. Okay, the government is always one of the most powerful entities whenever you're talking about inter-factor ability to manage certain things. Of course, there are international organizations that and NGOs that can come in and do certain outreach programs. WHO, World Health Organization, is one of them. So they either come in and provide certain equipment, certain training for certain groups who are at risk of a particular disease, or they come and provide help for the government who may be too poor or don't have the necessary expertise. So we always need to remember, for NGOs and organizations that are non-government linked, their problem generally lies in two ways. Okay, once again, it's all about the money. If they don't have money, if they're very dependent on donations and the donations dry up, then they are unable to do anything. Second thing is they don't have absolute power to implement laws, so they can only make suggestions. Now, suggestions, although good, may not always be taken up. So on page 240 onwards, you will see the final case study is on HIV/AIDS in Uganda, and how Uganda actually challenged, was facing a very big challenge to deal with HIV/AIDS due to some of the cultural factors they have, some of the economic factors that they have, and due to the inadequacies of the government's actions. So it will be useful if you have some time to read through. There's no need to go in too much details, but it gives you a case study to frame all this on. Now, once again, I would like to end this section on health and diseases by saying this. Health and disease, just like many things you learn in human geography, are useful for your long-term existence as a human being, because we are social animals. Even though some of us do prefer to be alone, but we are generally still social animals. Because of that, our actions do impact beyond ourselves. So as you grow older and as you proceed away from learning geography as an academic subject, you have to understand that geography is an essential part of life, and many of your decisions do have a long-lasting impact on other people and other parts of society. Whether you want to choose to take the route that leads to you to individual success and global domination and death and destruction for everyone else, or the one that is a bit more balanced, it's totally up to you. Nobody can tell you any other ways, but understand that there are implications, and that every single decision you make, is as big as your occupation or as minor as which hawker store you choose to buy your next meal from, all these decisions have a larger impact. Okay, geography is about scale, it's about relationship, it's about perspective. Okay, it's about having a clear understanding of all this will make you a better human being. And with that, we've come to the end of chapter 3, Health and Diseases, Gateway 3. Once again, this is a guide to give you some clarity. It is if you haven't noticed, there's very little written down on the slides here. It's largely images. It's an explanation that works together with the notes that your teachers may have provided you with, or with the textbook itself. So please refer back to the textbook for more details. Thank you very much. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe, and I will see you.